We're joined by Jaycee of the Strickland at the Strickland on Twitter. If you guys have heard of them, Instagram too, a big Knicks community over there. They do a lot of content. So we're very enjoyed. We're very enjoyed. We're in. I'm enjoying having you as our first guest here on the podcast for this little mini series to spruce things up a little bit. JC, if you want to give us a little introduction about yourself, how you got into being a Knicks fan, into making Knicks content, the floor is yours.
What's up, everybody? My name is JC. Thank you guys for having me. I've been a Knicks fan for as long as I can remember. I remember being a fan right before the Melo trade, and it was just always on cable. I just attracted to that team, but I got started on like just content creation in general, just tweeting. I was first. I'm not gonna lie, I was first to troll on Twitter, and then just started taking things more serious, having more takes, and then I got with the Strickland. I create content there, and then I do my own stuff on my YouTube and TikTok. So more to come, but this is my first guest appearance, so I appreciate you guys.
A big shout out to you for coming on. Talking about the Twitter space, Knicks Twitter, very controversial space to say the least, but there's a lot of highs, a lot of lows. Do you have any personal favorite pages or even tweets themselves, from the Knicks this season or even past seasons? As definitely don't mention BKE. I knew you wouldn't do that, but just quick diss to BKE really quick.
Yeah, I would say my favorite page got to be Tag. The quickness of like the post that he puts out, the edits is just crazy. I mess with him, and then going forward like Knicks Fan TV, the Strickland, of course, Knicks Film School, everybody that produces content, my favorites. Then you got the lower level trolls that I'm cool with on the side, but I feel like just everybody. I like everybody. I like the old heads, the trolls. It's just a nice space, and then when it's negative. I guess it's fun too, but yeah, I mess with everybody over there for sure.
Yeah, after the losses and wins, the timeline is so bipolar. I think more than maybe any fan base. Shout out Tag really quick too. IQ for three on Twitter. So lucky as a fan base to have someone like him to put out clips and highlights as quickly and as well as he does. Literally ridiculous. An insane guy, so shout out to him. Let's get into the Knicks talk though, starting with last game. A McHale game winner. I was almost numb to it at this point. I barely had a reaction, if I'm genuinely being honest to you. Being in a dogfight with the Trailblazers, I know Brunson's out. Just initial thoughts to that game, because at least on the bright side, we did see McHale or what he could look like as the focal point of the offense, because Tibbs finally decided to feed him, the fourth quarter and overtime.
Yes, I knew the game was going to be crazy from the afternoon when the Tibbs and McHale quotes were coming out, and that started a war. Basically, McHale saying that they don't need to play every minute. So I knew it was going to be crazy. I knew that McHale was going to take a bigger leap with on-ball creation with no Brunson because Cat just himself can't do much with the ball. I don't know if you guys saw, but like by the third quarter, beginning of the fourth, I posted. It was just luck for real. I just said, this Mikel game winner is going to be crazy. I had just had a feeling that that's how the night was going to end, and then ended up happening. But I think it was good for like just trying to find out different things, just knowing that Mikel, it's easy to go to him. Like you said, Tibbs was trusting him, and I think he should be a focal point just to get that confidence up. Without Brunson, we can't rely much on Mr. Coach in terms of sets and plays. So we
No, not at all.
rely a lot on Mikel, but it was definitely a fun game. Just as soon as you know that Brunson's not playing, anything goes. We can be in a dogfight, get blown out, blow out another team. So I think it was a fun game overall. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, it was definitely the Blazers are a better team than a lot of people give them credit for. I think, the casual fans aren't aware of how good they've been at stretches this year. Josh Hart's late game mental mistakes is something though that I want to point out too. And I love Josh Hart. There's no bigger Josh Hart supporter, than myself. It's just so odd to me because it feels like for most of the game, and he's such an high IQ player, such a balls to the wall kind of guy. He's willing to do whatever it takes to win. What do you think it is about these, late game stretches that sometimes his brain just seems to, turn off and he goes to, almost seems like a rookie at times?
I just think it's just not his role to be that late game distributor, like to just be that high of a offensive piece in down the stretch. I think he's best used as a weapon. And I think because of our injuries, because Brunson's out and just because Tibbs loves him, he has such a big role that he wants to do so much at once. It also like that's why his defense sometimes is bad because he wants to help, he wants to be on top of his matchup. But I just think when Brunson comes back, I think there's got to be like some type of way to like get the ball out of Josh's hands late. I just even think Deuce should play over him sometimes because he's just not the best with the ball when it comes to shooting, decision making. And I can't even put too much blame to him because it's also just how the way he's used. Like he's just not LeBron. Like I know we make jokes about that. He's good for 3 quarters, but like once it's crunch time, you got to put the ball in the hands of the people who can score, make better decisions. So I just think it's a use thing and how Tibbs use them, but we'll see going forward what happens.
I was gonna say this for a little bit later, but why don't we get into the Tibbs discussion then? Because I think it's a very, polarizing conversation right now. I used to love Tibbs, used to be a big supporter of him. I am so officially just like done. The offense is inexcusable at this point. We're in 2025. The offense looks like mid 2000s at time, just relying on talent and to get ISO buckets. What does the future of Tom Thibodeau look like for you? Or do you want him on this team going forward? Are you cool with him? Do you think there's any way that he gets this team past a second round appearance right now?
I was a Tibbs supporter too. I thought that he, in terms of like just not playing the kids when we had him and who he went to, I think he just did what he had to win. But I think now we're at the point, maybe I think the game is leaving him just a little bit. He is older, and I think that coaches are getting younger, they're getting more modern. So I definitely think the game is leaving him in terms of just like how he goes about it. I was personally done by him with him by like game 7 because he played a 6.5 man rotation by game 7. And by that point, I already knew that like you just can't do that. From the minutes thing, from the plays that he runs, I think that his time with the Knicks has come. If I think he'll stay, it depends. I think that 0 for 9 against the top 3 teams, I think it's a concern, and I would like to think the front office is looking at that for sure. But if we continue it, we have 3 more games against Cavs and Celtics. If it goes 0 for 12 against them, and then you lose embarrassingly against even the first round, or just losing against the Celtics bad, then I think they're gonna fire him. And I
Yeah,
don't think it's gonna be like a big fire. I think they just bring him up to the front office.
yeah, that's exactly. They'll do the Brad Stevens thing. I think it's just so hard when you see this team max out at the same spot years and years. We're not used to this as Knicks fans. Like legitimately, we're not used to seeing our teams. At least for us, we're not. We didn't see the '90s Knicks, so seeing them max out and being frustrated with where they're not being able to get is kind of a new feeling. So I think that's why a lot of the older fans sometimes are like, "Look where we were for 20 plus years," but you can't live with that kind of mindset. You are in a position where you can contend for a title right now. Look what the Cavs did. They fired JB Bickerstaff. They got better. I mean, the Pistons hired JB Bickerstaff, fired the other coach, got better. The Magic got better when they hired Jamal Mosley. The Thunder, I mean, they had a terrible roster, but when they got diagonal, it just seems like change of head coaches seems to be what takes teams over the top right now. And I have no confidence in Tibbs to help my team win a basketball game if we're in the last like 2 minutes. It's like, okay, talent take us home or else we're screwed. The inbounds plays I've seen this man draw up are actually ridiculous.
Insane, man. It's insane. I have this idea that like I know against those top 3 teams, the Knicks get blown out by 30, but I don't think the talent discrepancy is by 30 points. I
Oh,
just
not at
think it
all.
always comes down to system, the schemes ran, the lineups they put out. So that's just the way I see it. I think 0 for 9 is against those teams is inexcusable, and the way we lost too. So
For
I'm,
example,
I'm down for another coach. So
like look at Jericho Sims right now. I hate Jericho Sims. Awful basketball player, in my opinion. Now I don't know if I can actually say that confidently because you look at him, Doc Rivers is getting stuff out of him. They're switching pretty much everything. They're using Jericho's mobility on the perimeter to a T. And Tibbs, it seems like every single time you get up a player who specializes in something, Sham, it was supposed to be a 3 point shooter. I haven't seen him draw up a 3 point play for Landry Sham in probably 2 months. You have Campaign, who's a spark plug facilitator. He kind of just throws them in whenever. I think that's the one guy he uses kind of correctly. Precious, he'll just throw in the double big lineup and we'll have the worst floor spacing in the history of the NBA. I don't even know how to evaluate Precious because some nights he looks great. Some nights it's like, why are you not playing football or something? It's just I think is that not such a big concern that you have these role players or niche guys who are supposed to be good at certain things and Tibbs basically ignores them at what they're best at doing?
I think about the Cavs specifically. I tell people, I was like, do you really think they have 10 to 12 players who are great basketball players or are elite? I think that if you put even half of those on other teams, they're not shining as much as they are. And it just goes back to the coach. The coach, Atkinson, he puts everybody in positions to win. That's how you have to examine role players because no role players, if a role player was perfect, they'd all be Derek White. And they're not. They're not all perfect. Even Josh Hart is not
That
perfect.
gave Dion a little smile, our resident Celtics fan over here in the corner. You can say something if you want to give your little shout out to Derek
Yeah, no,
White.
absolutely. Shout out to Derek White. I mean, every team would love to have a
If
Derek White
Josh
on their
Hart could
team.
shoot a basketball, basically, or
Yeah.
consistently, because the Ben Simmons treatment too is a thing that I've noticed with Hart. I'm sure you've noticed it too. Teams are not guarding him at all, and it's kind of fucking up the entire Knicks offense. The whole thing with getting Towns was supposed to be, oh, let's run this 5-out offense, and now Cat's shooting under 5 threes a game this season, which is I think the lowest since his rookie or maybe the lowest period. Mr. Stat Guy, you can check us on that, but I think it's just so bizarre that this team doesn't play to their strengths. If they're going to lean all offense, go all offense. At least the defense has been better now. Mitch has kind of been the saving grace. They've gone from 20th in defense to 14th since he's been back. It's only been about 2 weeks. Does Mitch solve any defensive problems? Come play. I mean, not solve any, but is he enough to just band-aid everything for this defense? We've finally seen McHale and OG play well together, but it seems like Mitch is that guy that holds it all down.
I think we've seen some bright spots. He's definitely on the minutes restriction, so we haven't gotten much. But one thing I've realized that Tibbs has done, he's ran the death lineup that we all want to see with Brunson, Mikal, OG, Cat, and Mitch, basically putting Cat at the four. And we've seen about like I think 5 or 6 minutes, but those have been the best minutes I've ever seen in my. That's the peak fandom I've had since the Sixers series last year. It just everything looks right. OG playing more on the perimeter, Cat being able to guard the corners, Mitch in the paint. I think that's a great lineup. And then the other lineup he's played was Brunson, Deuce, OG, Mikal, and then Mitch at the five. And that's been a spark plug lineup using the bench. I think Mitch is definitely a key that'll help. I think you'll at one point in the playoffs, you'll have to choose between Cat or Mitch in terms of certain situations. You can't have both of them against like a Boston, but I definitely think the more he plays, the more I think other players will buy in on defense. And we just see having a rim protector out there, you need it. It doesn't matter what type of time period it is, how many small ball lineups there are, you need a rim protector in the paint. So I definitely think he'll help.
Yeah, that's a big reason I think the Warriors are still going to suck come playoff time. That's a whole different discussion, completely unrelated. But Mitchell Robinson plus 11.9 net rating when he's on the court since he's been back. It's limited minutes, like you said, but I think we just see where this team's full potential can be when they have a legitimate rim protector on the floor or even if Ariel Hoporti was still healthy, if he wasn't out right now with his knee injury, I think if he gives you 10, 15 minutes off the bench, he's enough of a substitute that you can get away with starting Mitch. And even if it's only playing him 20, 22 minutes a game, come playoff time. We saw Cat last year. He was great defender in the playoffs, like playing in help, especially against Jokic. He was one of the best defenders on Jokic in the entire playoffs. I think you have to have Cat at the four. It's unfortunate because I think it takes away a lot of what makes him special at the five. But I really don't know if I see an avenue to winning anymore with having Cat as a center.
I agree. I think the defense is just way too bad, and I think that
It's ridiculous. I didn't realize it was going to be this bad.
it affects the wings as well. They don't have somebody to rely to in the paint. As for him playing the four, like we see it in Minnesota, like he was just chucking threes, he was taking threes, and on the Knicks, he don't take them. I think that even if they don't go down, even if he has like the problems in his hands, his gravity at the three, like the way people have to defend him, the way they have to look out for his 3-point shot, that's a weapon in itself in terms of creating space. And they just don't use that to their advantage. They want to put Precious out there at the four and have him in the paint while Spot is catching it on the post. And I just don't think it's a real use of his powers. Like you have to use that at his
He's shooting a career high from three, and they haven't let him shoot more. It's kind of bizarre. I feel like when we went back to the beginning of the season, we saw Cat whipping these crazy passes all around from the perimeter because guys were doubling him at the 3-point line, leaving backdoor cutters wide open. And the offense doesn't even look anything close to what it did the first few weeks of the season. We saw flashes of it the past few games, especially Portland the fourth quarter, even though whatever happened there with Denny, that last second shot, the fouling was ridiculous. But I think that the offense has to be this team's identity, and it's something that the Knicks haven't ever really had, especially under Tibbs, is they're not comfortable with the offensive identity. But I think right now your only way to win games, especially, when you're in a 7 game series, I'm not saying play no defense whatsoever, but the identity has to be, Houston Rockets-esque of the late 20 teens. You have to outscore your opponents at this point.
Sure. And one thing I'm upset about, I think, on Tibbs's front is just we had so many centers of the same mold, and he didn't really try cat at the four. Like even I know, we have our things about Sims, but he was playing better. We didn't
He
see
was.
all cat Sims minutes, barely saw any cat Hukporti. So then now once we want Cat and Mitch to play together, but Cat hasn't had any reps. I think from the start of the trade, it was premature to put Cat back at the four when he had, I mean, put Cat back at the five when he had so many years playing the four. And he had arguably not his best statistical season, but they won 57 games with him
Yeah.
at the four and they went that far. So I think you should have tried it. You should have tried some minutes. I think he'll be better at the four when he plays this year, but even then they have no reps at it. So I think him playing the five is what we have to go with, but it's like you said, the offense has to be on point. We have to try to outscore teams because we know what happens when Cat is on the drop. So yeah.
The thing that boggles me in my mind so much is that Tibbs consistently allows him to play in drop coverage when he's maybe the worst, drop defender I've laid my own 2 eyes on. I knew he was a bad defender at the five in Minnesota. I guess it had been a few years, so I kind of forgot. Yeah, it's an experience to say the least. But you saw it work with Gobert in the playoffs. I think Mitch gives you a lot of what Gobert offers you when he's healthy at this point in his career. He's laterally a little quicker than Gobert. He can give you a little more athleticism. He's shooting his free throws well this season somehow. And he has an OnlyFans. That's another random. Dion, did you know about that?
Yeah, you've been sharing some of his Snapchat stories with me, so I'm partially aware of the situation. I don't know about Mitchell Robinson, man. He's a unique one.
He's an interesting character, but they do need him come playoff time. Are you still scared or are you scared of the Cavs if the Knicks have Mitch, or do you think that there's still a world where they win that playoff series? Because I think the Celtics, at least to me, especially how they match up, maybe not how good of a team they are. Maybe the Cavs are a little bit of a regular season team, or maybe come playoff time against certain lineups like the Bucks, they're probably better against than maybe the Celtics are because they have the interior defense. But I still would much rather play the Cavs in a 7 game series right now than Boston.
For sure. To me, I'm a professional hater. So for the Cavs, I'm gonna have to see it in the playoffs to see
Yep,
their success.
right there
I
with
just
you.
think with Boston, they just have a different like motivation against the Knicks. It's a certain fire, and then at the end of the day, they are defending champs, no matter how many regular season games they lose. For me, the Cavs, I think that Evan Mobley 3-point shot, I don't think it'll hold for him to play the four. He's gonna have to finish a lot of games at the five. They have a great coaching system, but it really just comes down to I think Brunson's better than anybody on the Cavs, and I think I like our chances against them. I definitely would rather play them because the Celtics at this point. I used to not fear the Jays. I used to think that we used to give them a run for their money,
Mm,
but now after this season, I'm terrified. I don't want to see them,
yeah.
so I'd rather play the Cavs for sure.
I've learned my lesson on the sipping on the Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown haterade. The more I seem to sip it, the more I seem to get bit in the ass by it. So I'm done. I'm done.
Yeah.
Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, great players, defending champions. You got it. Until we finally get over that hump, y'all got it. Not saying anything. Derek White lives in my nightmares. I wake up in cold sweats about him sometimes. Regardless, you look at going back to the Knicks coaching situation, potential candidates if the Knicks do fall short in the playoffs. Seems like a very short list, but at the top of that short list could be a former assistant and then potential Cavs insider slash trader slash Benedict Arnold, who can bring some information back over from his year in Cleveland. I have been on the Johnny Bryant train for a very long time. He's the guy I want as the next Knicks head coach. What are your thoughts on that? Or who else do you think could possibly end up being in the running for that if Tibbs does inevitably get moved to the front office?
Yeah, I always wanted Johnny to be the next up since he was under Tibbs for so long. He understood like the players, he understands the team. I wanted him to go to be the coach. I understand why he left though. I think at the moment before you knew Atkinson was gonna be who he was now, he did have the better chance to become head coach quicker. So I can't blame him off that. I'm still a little salty he left, but I would definitely welcome him back. The only thing I do know about him as a coach is that he handles the rotations in Cleveland, which I think they have one of the best rotation systems, and they're known for their depth. So I would definitely take him back. I think he knows the players. A lot of his favorite players did leave, like Julius Randle, Barrett, and quickly. But at the end of the day, it's still a business. He's still been around. The other person that I think I'd like him more than Johnny is Sam Cassell. He's an associate head coach in Boston. He's been around. He's coached under Ty Lue, Doc Rivers, and now he won a ring with Joe Mazzulla. Former point guard, understands the game on a deeper level because of that, and he's also just like a good person. Like the Celtics, they talk about how they wouldn't have chipped without him. They would. He's such a high energy player. He's always showing more energy than Joe Mazzulla. Joe Mazzulla is so nonchalant,
But yeah.
dreaming and things like that. So he's also talked about wanting head coach opportunities. So those are definitely two. There's others like Chris Quinn out of Miami and Mike Onora, but I really don't have anything under. I just know that they've been under successful teams, but those two are definitely the ones that I'd go for sure.
Yeah, I like the Cassell shot a lot because I thought he's a guy who's long overdue for a head coaching opportunity. I thought before Nick Nurse got it with Philly that he would have been, the guy that should have been got it or should have got it next up because he was an assistant there for a while. It's going to be really interesting because I think that, if they lose in embarrassing fashion, how can you justify, especially to the fan base, not making a change? And I don't know if they have the means to make a big enough roster change that they can really turn around to do anything. Like the Giannis dreams are nice. Do I think that's realistic? Probably not. Realistically, your core is going to be the same next year, and you're going to have to just make some, hit on your minimums, hit on your, hopefully, will they even be able to have an MLE? I'm not even sure with the whole CBA situation right now with how much they'll be over because I think they got under the second apron but then if they sign PJ Tucker, I think they'll be back over the apron, which is the problem with that. Regardless, I'm not going to get into the money thing right now. Jalen Brunson's injured, and that's not good. Are you actually worried about Jalen Brunson's injury right now, or do you think we're chilling come playoff time? I right now very back and forth because ankle sprains are such a tricky thing to try to gauge.
I think he won't be the same. Obviously an injury is an injury. But I have faith in Brunson. He's quite literally, the head of the snake. I think he'll be fine. I think this time without him will have the players learning how to like just maneuver without having Brunson on the floor. They're so reliant when he is. So you'll see people like Mikal and Cat learning different ways. So I think that'll help. But I think he'll be fine. I think there's just precautionary measures. I would like him to come a little bit before the playoffs to like
Get that
get
All
off the
NBA
rust,
spot.
yeah, and get up the NBA spot and clutch player of the year. But I think he'll be fine. I think this time period is important though. Just learning without him because I think they're just too dependent on Brunson sometimes.
Yeah, I think in a way it could be a blessing in disguise, assuming Brunson comes back full health. They have to learn to play without him. The minutes without Brunson on the court, especially down the stretch of games. That Lakers game was the biggest example of it. If Brunson's not doing anything, the team just stops playing productive basketball and they revert to being a high-end lottery team, it seems. When you have a guy like that, it's great to be able to rely on it, but the Knicks do it to a fault, almost to what I think the Nuggets have done with Jokic this year. When your top gun isn't going, you have to learn to play without it. And I think right now is the perfect time for them to do that. And we're seeing the balance between McHale and Cat start to figure itself out a little bit.
Yeah, I think because Cat has his limitations with the ball in his hands. Personally, I don't like when he catches it top of the key, pump fake, and then drives hard as hell. Like it just
No.
is setting himself up. But I think Mikal learning that mid range game again, taking those mid ranges, learning that I think that'll definitely help everybody's confidence. OG since the Heat game where he was taking things personally, standing like Jason, he's looked great. I just think it's a balance overall. So it'll definitely help. I'm just more looking at Mikal. I think Cat is just gonna be always who he is. He hasn't stopped playing like that. He definitely needs Brunson's playmaking to get those threes off. They often struggle getting him the ball, but definitely looking more towards Mikal as like, kind of a savior during this time.
Yeah, as per Mr. Sherman over here, Mikal has his lowest usage rate right now since 21-22, his last full season in Phoenix. We saw with Brooklyn, he took that offensive leap, and now, giving up five first round picks from you hope that he was going to be that true third fiddle. it was OG a lot of the times at the beginning of the season. They've kind of now split that, seemingly one night on, one night off for both of them. It's starting to come together. Finally, the peanut butter and jelly is, it's sticking together. There's no more wrapper around the slices of bread. I don't know what that analogy was. I see that little look
Yeah,
you gave me. I was trying to
what
think of
bread are you
something.
buying that comes in slices like that, like
Dude,
individually
you know
wrapped
the
slices?
bread that has like the parchment paper like separating it. Sometimes I get that.
Individual
Yeah,
slices? No, I mean, I don't know. Maybe you're getting like that nice
not from like a
bakery
bakery.
bread.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know.
Anyways, what I really want to see is Mikhail and OG work together. Obviously, that's the dream, but the defense, I think, more so because when they're helping each other defensively, it frees up their offense too. Because the Knicks' defense is their best offense.
Mhm.
When it happens, rarely, compared to last few seasons, it seems like it was always the defense turning into offense. I'm just gonna ask this, I guess, really quickly. Who is the Knicks' second best player other than Carl, or second or third best player? Do you think OG's better than Karl-Anthony Towns, in terms of being important to the Knicks? Who is that? I guess second most important player on the Knicks? Is it Mikhail, OG, Cat, Josh?
I think it'll always be Mikel. Just because Cat is a big, it's hard. You have to be like some level of generational to be that much of a like offensive focal point, especially down the stretch. Cat has his limitations. Once he sees a double, he doesn't work the best. He's definitely a player like they always compared Cat and Brunson to Shaq and Kobe. Shaq got his through 3 quarters, and then the ball just went into Kobe's hands. So like Cat is definitely like an 3 quarter kind of guy, but I think once it comes down to needing the ball in somebody's hands, I think Mikel is very important. He definitely needs that space. His midi is like automatic this season. I don't know if it's always been like that or when he got to Brooklyn it got like that, but
I think it was Brooklyn. Like when he
yeah.
gets that, 10, 15 feet away with no one. If someone's in his face, sometimes he'll hit it off the back iron. But if there's no one in his vicinity, I don't think I've seen him miss more than like three times the entire year.
Yeah, for sure. And I just think personally, unless you're Jokic or Embiid, this is no knock to Cat, but unless you're one of those two, there really isn't much room for you to be like a real clear number one option in those playoffs because I think just like the floor shrinks, teams know your habits, and you just have to be unstoppable. And sometimes Cat is very stoppable. So I think you need somebody to be able to put the ball in their hands, look at the defense, be able to break it down, shoot those shots off the dribble. So I think Mikal is slightly more important, especially during crunch time, but Cat is still, the better player, of course.
Yeah, that description almost reminded me of Julius Randle a little bit. I do not miss Julius Randle, just saying that, but he has been fantastic for the Timberwolves, so shout out to him. Still think in hindsight you would have done the trade, or else your starting center would have been Jericho Sims or Randle for the start of the season.
Agreed.
And I think overall, still just going forward, Randle's contract situation, Cat has more value. But I think the Knicks have missed having that bruiser, someone who can, just draw a lot of double teams and work out of it well. I think that's Cat's one of his biggest weaknesses, like you alluded to. Does that make him benchable down the stretch of close games when it comes to the playoffs? Or Josh Hart, I know he gets guarded differently. Is there a world where you see both of those guys or one over the other getting benched?
I think that the lineup that I mentioned earlier of Brunson, Deuce, Mikal, OG, and Mitch has to be an option, closing down just certain playoff games. I think the ball's going to go into Brunson either way, so I just think you have to put him in the best position to be able to score. We know that it's going to be Brunson hero ball, but I just think that lineup has just the best balance. It's the best defensive lineup that you can put around Brunson, but it also has creators like Deuce and Mikal and OG. And I think that lineup for sure, Tibbs has to consider it. I know that he loves playing Hart too much. He loves closing with him over Deuce, but it has to be something that, you just you can't make mistakes. The Knicks love digging themselves into holes that they have to climb themselves out of, but in the playoffs and NBA playoffs, you can't really put yourself in that situation every time. So I think Hart and Cat are definitely benchable, and there's no wrongness to it. Like Cat got benched last year. People get benched. It is what it is. You have to put yourself in position to win. So they definitely can get benched. I would bench them if needed.
never would I really advocate for benching Jalen Brunson. I would never even mention it. But the defense has, had a bit of an uptick since he's been out. I think for the most part, his defense has been pretty good this year. He's a pest. He's not someone you're going to stick on ball and say, hey, you'll get me a stop. But he's a smart team defender. He's willing to put his body on the line. But just having Deuce in there for him, who is, goes from, an okay defender, someone that's passable, to a very, very good guard defender. What do you like about the Deuce lineups over Brunson that we've seen with him out? And is there some situations where you'd like to see, Brunson get elongated rest on the bench to try to get, that point guard Deuce lineup going?
There were a lot of times in the playoffs last year that things weren't looking too well, and the Brunson hero ball was only taking us so far, like against the Sixers and the Pacers. Bringing in Deuce really just like gave the lineup like a fresh look. He was hitting important shots. I definitely think it's a look you can go to, but at the end of the day, I don't like Deuce at the one. I just don't think he's a point guard. I know he has the build for it. I know that he said he's a point guard, but it's just a struggle sometimes. You can just tell who has the natural feel for a point guard. One gripe I have for Tibbs in these games without Brunson is that they should use like a campaign or Tyler Kolek more, because they are natural point guards. There's no knock to Deuce. But I think do have lineups where you can put Deuce over Brunson just for defensive purposes, just energy wise. But I think alongside each other is where they both exceed. Deuce off ball, him taking some responsibilities on the ball. So yeah, I love Deuce. I'm a Deuce guy.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't love Deuce at the one, but overall, I do love Deuce. I think Deuce at the two is perfect. He can play a bit above his size because of that wingspan and defensive abilities. Before we wrap things up, my biggest gripe with Tibbs is something you just mentioned, is unwillingness to play the young guys. Because especially when you look at this bench, is there really anyone on this fucking bench that you're going to tell me really has earned a spot as a solidified bench guy over some of these young guys? Campaign, some nights so awesome. Some nights there's no reason for him to be touching the court. And in those games, I don't see why Tyler Kolek, who was viewed as one of the most NBA ready offensive prospects of the entire draft, isn't getting some form of, run. Campaign's not some elite defender himself. He'll get a few steals, but he's a huge gambler. I think at least Kolek will try to play him straight up. And I don't think it's bad enough that you can't play him, 10-ish minutes in a game, especially against someone like the Trailblazers when the offense had faltered in the second half. Get a guy like that in who's had a lot of success in the G League. I know Daddy hasn't been great, so I'm not going to advocate for him, a guy who struggled in the G League. It just feels every other team that wants to contend relies on rookies or second year players to play big time minutes, and the Knicks are the only team in that top, few seeds of either conference that doesn't have any young guys getting real minutes.
I think there's Tibbs has a certain like fear to him. I don't know what it is. He just thinks that if you put a rookie or a young guy, it's gonna go bad. But in hindsight, it's just like if you have these players, like we said, making their strengths stand out, you have them against with the vets. Dadier's best minutes were against like the Wizards in preseason. Like he got play with them, and it was against Brunson. He was cutting, moving along the 3-point line. I'm not advocating for him to play, but I just think that when you have such young players, you have to create lineups where they're playing with vets. The vets are telling them where to go specifically, and you have Brunson, which is like one of the biggest mega point guards ever that can score and pass the ball. In terms of Kolek, I don't I didn't really like him in the lineup just because campaign, even though he chucks a lot, he just has something that other players don't, and that's confidence. I think he has the second most confidence outside of Brunson to be able to create on his own. And sometimes we need that when guys like Mikal and OG are being shy with shooting the ball. Campaign just comes in, shoots above the big three. It's not the best, but sometimes it opens up the floor for other people. So I think now with no Brunson, Kolek should be playing because I think you should value point guard. Being a point guard, Deuce and Hart are just aren't, and they just have the ball handling abilities. But I think going next year, you just need to trust those guys, and they need to play pivotal roles.
Well, we'll see what Tibbs has in store for his Knicks as we wait for Jalen Brunson's return in the next few weeks. Still hold that number three seed in the East. We'll see where they end up. But that's going to do it for this first episode of Knicks Talk, whatever we're going to call it. I will have a more creative title by the time this is uploaded. But thank you, and a huge shout out to Jaycee for joining us here on this first episode. Any final things you want to get off your chest?
Thanks for having me. Follow me on Twitter. I'll be posting bangers.
Follow him, Jaycee, on Twitter. We will link his stuff in the description. And thank you guys so much for tuning in. Stay tuned. Follow us at 2 for 1 Hoops on all social media, and hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day.